continue providing everybody who's stuck at home with just an environment for creatives and storytellers to come together. We do a wide range of these, from filmmaking to animation to graphic design. We want you to know that Columbia College Hollywood and Flashpoint Chicago, we're here as a resource for you. We have an amazing special guest today. He is the chair of our cinema program, Mr. Dave Martin. How are you, Dave?
Good. Hey guys, I'm good.
Awesome.
How you doing, Brad?
Before I let you take over, I'm just letting everyone else know, we keep this very informal. We have a great topic for today. If you have any questions, write them in the chat. If you want to unmute yourself when Dave gives you the option, feel free to do so. But again, Dave, these are all students who are planning to start with us in the summer and in the fall. Some very good filmmakers. I know some of these students, so I want to turn it over to you.
Cool. Well, welcome guys. Thanks for spending some time with me here this afternoon. If you want to unmute, go ahead. I think at the first, I want to get to know a little bit about who is here. Who are you all who are in here? So where are you guys coming from? Where do you come in here to study, and how are you doing? How are you making the most of your time here in these lockdowns? Anybody brave enough to get on the mic first? Or you guys can use the chat as well if you're not feeling like you want to unmute just yet.
How are you as filmmakers, storytellers? How are you guys doing? How are you staying busy? Oh, it looks like everyone's muted. Hold on, that's on me.
Let's see, Brad, can we unmute everybody?
Yes, that's on me. I apologize for that. Give me 1 second, guys. All right, everybody should be unmuted who has capabilities, so feel free to talk.
Hello, thank you for unmuting us.
Sorry.
No.
I know, sometimes, we wish we had that ability in the classroom, just like hit a button, everybody quiet.
Certainly.
Yeah, so Micah, you spoke up first. Where are you beaming in from?
I'm from Wichita, Kansas right now.
Okay, cool. And you're in Wichita right now?
I'm making movies. There's been some film, like stay-at-home film races. I participated in one of those, and then I've actually taken the opportunity to get back into screenwriting. So I'm co-writing some scripts, and I think now is a good time to write. So I've been creative, and I appreciate you guys having these meetings and these Zoom calls, because it kind of makes us feel like a community and stuff. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. And I think, it's, writing is certainly a great way to spend some time during all of this. You don't need much to write something, right? One of the things that I want to talk about today is this idea of, the things that you could do visually without necessarily needing other people involved. My background is in cinematography, and I'm also a visual artist, so I don't write too much, except like kind of when I have to. Not that I don't love it when I do have to, but I'm an image maker. I love making pictures, and so for me, I think one of the things that I want to get through in this session is give you guys some ideas of what I've been doing as part of my kind of ongoing practice and how it fits into all of this lockdown stuff, and hopefully for some of you who are filmmakers and who are eager to start working on a big set with a lot of people and a cast, some very real things that you can do now before we're back in that situation to kind of keep yourself sharp and keep sort of developing your artistic voice. So I think, what's the situation like in Kansas? I know, so I'm in Santa Monica, California, and we are just kind of starting to come out of some of the lockdown. So people are allowed back in the parks. Some of the stores are opening up again. The light at the end of the tunnel is kind of coming into view, at least for us here. How is it for you guys out wherever you are? He's again muted. Okay. If that's me this time.
Sorry, I apologize if that was me. Kansas is, we have an interesting situation where we have I don't want to make, I mean, I'll just say what's going on. We have a governor who is totally at odds with everyone else in on our state government. So it's like, she's like, oh, mandates, safety mandates. And then everybody else is like, no, we're going to, pass this bill that says no. And then she's like, okay, I'm going to veto that bill. So there's a lot of that political stuff going on. Yeah, I have friends in LA. So I've heard a lot about what's going on there. It seems like it's better in Kansas, but that's probably because we have less giant populated areas.
Sure. Yeah, we have quite a few of those here in LA for sure.
Yeah, so I'm at the CCH's Chicago campus, and what's so neat to see is the film studios here in Chicago. They've been a big part in relief of storing food and, because they have all that space. So it's just neat seeing the film community here in the city being involved as well.
Cool. Anybody else want to care to join us?
Yeah, I can go ahead.
We'll give, I saw Peyton's hand go up. I saw her actual hand go up, not the visual, not the Zoom hand. Go ahead, Peyton.
Hi, my name's Peyton. I live in Bakersfield, California, so I'm not too far from the LA campus. That's where I come to attend in the fall. And I don't know, I'm just an aspiring filmmaker person, so yeah.
Okay. Any particular aspect of filmmaking that really gets you excited?
Editing and cinematography is really fun for me.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Me too. Yeah. All right. And who is next? Yet another voice was chiming up there.
Yeah, I was saying something, but okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
So thank you. First of all, I just want to say thank you for being here, and thank you for inviting us to be here. My name is Azigza, go for Azi. So just briefly, I was born in Ethiopia, I grew up in Sweden, and now I'm here in America studying communication studies. But at the same time, while I was in Sweden, I was doing films, short and documentaries, commercials, music videos. And last year I had this internship at Warner Brothers. I was in Los Angeles for a couple months. And now I am in Washington, DC. I applied to CCH, so very excited that I get admitted. So right now I'm just trying to understand a few things before I come to LA, understand and while they're locked down, so I'm just trying to be very creative and try to understand what I can use this time. Mostly I use this time to organize my own footage, things that I have done, scripts, stories that I wrote as an idea, try to develop them. I'm more interested in directing, but also very interested in cinematography. But if I choose one of them, I will be more directing.
More directing. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else want to have before we get?
It looks like Diego in the chat said he's been doing movie tributes on his YouTube page that involves aspects of filmmaking. So he's been doing some stuff socially on YouTube. Okay,
cool. Diego, if you want to throw a link up in the chat here so that we can all go and check that out after we're done. Yeah, we'd love to see those. Okay. All right, so let's get into, I don't know, kind of what we want to do, or what I want to do here with you guys today. So first of all, I want to say to you, all of you who are thinking about going to film school, congratulations. This is a really weird time to go to film school, both, I think, specifically with the lockdowns and the coronavirus and everything that's happening. But I think it's also a really interesting time to choose to study, you know, filmmaking or graphic design or visual effects. Because it is, you know, it kind of seems like with so much content available on YouTube, you know, the technology to make a film, the platform to get your film cut and then screened seems to be so ubiquitous that almost the logical step would be to think then, well, why do I even need to go to school? If I can learn how to do all of this stuff outside of there, you know, what's the value in going to film school? And for me, one of the ways that I, you know, really try to run the film department in Los Angeles is to, you know, make sure that we are giving you guys all the kind of technical training that you need so that you're getting your hands on professional gear. You're learning how to use, you know, the Adobe software suite, Avid, all that good stuff. But I think it's also important for us to recognize that you can learn a lot of that stuff anywhere. And so what you really get coming to film school is you get a faculty who are devoted to you guys, who have spent some time making media and kind of developing their own voice. And that's really what I think you can develop while you are in school is, or at least get yourself started down the path to having that unique voice. You know, for me, I think the more YouTube content I see, the more just sort of stuff that I watch that's randomly out there on the internet. The more a lot of it kind of starts to look the same. And so I think that for you guys as storytellers and you guys as artists, it is really important for you to find a way to you know, kind of find your own voice, as they say. And I know that's a cliche. You know, everybody's supposed to find their own voice as they go through life. And I think that what that means for me is both a lot of looking at art and then a lot of making of work as well, and always kind of thinking about how those two things sort of relate to each other. So that's kind of my general spiel on why I think, you know, going to film school is a really good idea. You know, I think with all of the content, with all the media in the world, we need good content, right? So you kind of figuring out what's important to you, what's special about your life and your story, and translating that onto screen and figuring out how to tell other people's stories and other kinds of stories, I think is really, really important. The next thing, and what kind of inspired what I want to talk about here in this session, is the fact that, you know, we're all living in screens right now. I mean, how many of you guys, I appreciate you all being here, but are kind of sick of being on Zoom all the time? For any time you want to talk to somebody or want to hang out. I see Brad's hand is up, you know. Mine is up here. A couple of you, you know, other folks as well. Yeah, you know, it's something that we're having to kind of live with right now, and eventually, we hopefully will not have to live with it, or at least all the time. But it kind of has gotten me thinking about some really fundamental concepts of filmmaking, and one of them is this idea of mise en scène. Does that term strike anybody's familiar? A few folks. I see Ozzy. No, Micah. If you would, what do you, when you hear that word, what does it mean?
Well, to me, and this might be inaccurate, but to me, it means like just a sense of style within a movie, I guess. A sense of voice. So like something like Wes Anderson has very much, you know, mise en scène with, just because he's, you know, and you can start naming like color and centered shots, blah blah blah. That's what I think it means.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, mise en scène. Let me go ahead and I'll start sharing this screen here. Okay. Yeah, so life in screens. So this first part of the talk here, sort of musings on life in lockdown and on living in scenes. And Mike is correct. So when we talk about mise en scène, it comes from the French, and it means basically to put on stage. And so it is an idea, this idea of everything that goes into a scene is part of the mise en scène. Now, you say that Wes Anderson has a very particular kind of a mise en scène. Certainly, when you see a Wes Anderson movie, you know that it's a Wes Anderson film. But it's not just one person who does this, right? It's the kind of the production designer to the cinematographer, the costumes, even the actors, the way that they move and that they interact with each other, is all kind of part of the mise en scène. So what I've got here that we can just go through quickly are sort of basically the kind of 5 elements that we are talking about with mise en scène. And then a little bit later after this, we'll get into some ways that you guys, I think, can practice this even while you're at home in quarantine with very little actual material. So one is setting. That's the time and the place, if the scene is inside, if it's outside, what time of day it's all taking place. The second thing is the decor, right? The objects that go into the scene, the art direction, all of the props and everything that's in the scene. The lighting is also part of the mise en scène. So whether the lighting is hard or it's soft light, if it is very stylized and artificial looking, or if it's very natural lighting, right? All of these things kind of tie in together to start telling the story. Framing as well. And so the other part of what I kind of want to talk about, or at least call out to you guys, is this idea of lens choice. So right now, part of what it is to live in a screen means that we're all living in these little tiny webcams that are stuck to the top of our laptops or on our phones or whatever they are. And so there are these very wide angle lenses, and we don't have much choice in how we kind of present ourselves to the world, unless you've got, something like this. This is a little adapter that I've been playing with recently. I got it a while back for the iPhone that lets me change out the lenses there. So when you get into film school, eventually you'll be working with something like the Alexa or the Red and really high-end prime lenses. But there are ways you can start right now with very cheap materials, things that don't cost a lot of money, to get a sense of what different lenses will do for you in terms of telling your story, or in terms of kind of creating a mood. And then the last thing here is makeup and costumes, right? The people who are in the places, what's on their faces, what are they wearing? All of that kind of contributes to the telling of the story. So next we'll go through. I've got some slides, some stills from some films that I really like, that I use a lot in some of the different classes that I teach. That I just want to kind of talk through some things, and this will be sort of a free form, a free association, one film kind of relating to the next. Do you guys recognize this film?
Yeah, Moonlight.
Yes. How many saw this film?
Heard of
A
it.
couple of you did at least. Heard of it?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm trying to pull up the. Hey, Brad, will you just keep an eye on the chat and let me know if there's any questions or anything that come up in there?
You got it.
While my screen share is on, I'm not seeing the
post,
chat. I don't want to miss.
Moonlight's IMDb in the chat as well.
Oh, great. Okay. Oh, here we go. I got the chat up for us. So in this film, I think one of the really key parts of the mise en scène that we talk about is the setting, right? It takes place in Miami, and the city, the locale, all of that really kind of becomes a character unto itself in this particular film. Right. Speaking of things that are very hot, this is from The Good, Bad, and the Ugly. It's a Western, right? A lot of Western films. The setting is really crucial. We think of the desert, the American Southwest, kind of a very hot, a very dry place, but not always. This is from a 1971 film called McCabe and Mrs. Miller. Probably not a lot of you have seen this film. But it's an example of what is sometimes called an anti-Western. And this one takes place in a little town in British Columbia up in Canada. And the main character here is not exactly the typical Western hero. And so having something that's familiar to what a Western is like, but then also kind of set somewhere different, very, very cold, a lot of snow. It's not your typical sort of Western locale. More contemporary Western film, The Revenant, from just a couple of years ago. How many, you guys all familiar with this film? Probably more of you are familiar with this.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it.
Yeah. And again, in this one, I think too, the photography and the choice, the time of day that a lot of this film is shot and takes place really, creates the mood and contributes to the story here. Here's a frame from There Will Be Blood, kind of another Western, still takes place in that same, it's a period piece, takes place primarily in the desert. And as you guys are looking at this film, anybody want to hazard a guess? What kind of a lens do you think this was shot on? Do you think this was taken on a wide angle lens or a more telephoto lens? Anybody, any guesses?
Ozzy says telephoto lens in the chat.
No, they shot on anamorphic.
Mm-hmm.
Drew says
what do you guys think?
wide
More
lens in the chat.
Okay, Ozzy, why do you think telephoto?
I think it's because the shot is from far away. Also, they try to have the object or the main character in the middle. So, yeah, I mean, it's just a random guess. Definitely, it might be different, but the lens would be more tailored in my view.
Telephoto? Okay. Drew, what do you think? You said a wide angle lens, and then Mike, I heard you speak up too. What do you?
Oh, I know that they shot. I know they shot it on anamorphic. I think that's what I heard. I don't know. So I think that affects the lenses, but I don't. So that's my contribution.
Sure, it does. It has its own kind of an effect on the image.
And Cordero says wide angle because the corners are wrapping.
Or warping, yes.
Warping. Sorry, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. So there's a couple of things in this photo that are, to me, suggested it's a wide angle lens. One is certainly the wide view that we're seeing, but the other one is the kind of the warping that we get here, and the space looks a lot bigger than we kind of think it is. One thing that wide angle lenses do is that they kind of exaggerate spatial distances. So as I move, if you're watching me on the on my kind of live video here, and I don't know if you guys have noticed this too, but if you, with your webcam, if you sort of move towards it and away from it, right, you might make these really small movements, but it feels like very big movements, right? So everything's really exaggerated. If I hold my hand up to the lens, right, it looks much, much bigger relative to my face than it actually should. So one thing that wide angle lenses do is that they tend to kind of exaggerate the sense of space in a landscape. So if this is looking like a wide angle lens, what do you guys think about this one? Do you think also a wide angle? Or do we think something different?
Feel free to use the chat.
Telephoto, Andrew, yes, you are correct there. So this is from a film called The Comedy with Tim Heidecker, if any of you are familiar with him from Adult Swim. The movie is called The Comedy. Spoiler, it's not a funny movie, really in particular at all. But one of the things, I kind of like the way that this is shot. This film is shot with a lot of telephoto lenses. And one of the things that a telephoto lens does is it tends to kind of flatten the space. So he's on a boat in New York City. The skyline is there in the background, but they look a lot closer together right, than they would if you were standing at this scene and kind of looking at it with your own two eyes. Okay, kind of getting back to the mise-en-scène thing. This is from a Lars von Trier film called Dogville. And I think what's really interesting about this is that there really is no interior or exterior. The whole film kind of takes place in this theatrical kind of staged area where we just have very minimal props, very minimal settings. You can tell from the settings that it is a period piece. It doesn't take place in the present day. But the kind of theatricality here lets us know that we are, we're not watching a realistic film here, right? So our expectations about what's going to happen in this film and what we are supposed to kind of think about it are a little bit different, right? Sort of what has happened here is that we have more of a kind of a diagram of a neighborhood rather than a representation of the neighborhood itself, right? Fight Club, we spend a lot of time in kind of dingy and dirty basements here, which sort of, these different locations and locales represent, this group of characters who are kind of taking society apart, who are really almost kind of like terrorists, but in the context of this film, they're kind of the anti-heroes. Those of you who have seen it, I don't think that it in the end of it, it doesn't really lionize these characters, I think, too much, but certainly the kind of the dilapidated surroundings here are really important to this film. Zero Dark 30, a film from 2012, a very different kind of a take, but a similar kind of a mise-en-scène where we're seeing a lot of kind of sparse, hidden, shadowy kind of locations. But obviously the context and the story of these is very different. This one is about, illegal torture and the war on terror, whereas Fight Club is maybe, with these guys is a war on consumerism, right? So it's more part of the Western culture wars sort of milieu, maybe, if you will. To then, in terms of setting, some things that are a little bit more whimsical. So this frame here is from Spike Jonze, is Being John Malkovich, and where we have a kind of a half of a floor in a building that has a passageway into the mind of actor John Malkovich. So sometimes the setting of a film isn't always in the real world, and another film that's kind of in the same vein of Being John Malkovich is Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. One of my favorite films. I've taught this film a lot. I've probably seen it a dozen times. And, what's really interesting about this one is that the way that the special effects and the sets and everything, a lot of this film takes place kind of inside of our main character's deteriorating memories. So it's a very interesting kind of setting for a film to think of, not a real place. These next two slides are from Blade Runner. This one is from the 1982 original Blade Runner. And what you see here is kind of a view of corporate opulence, right? This big kind of intimidating and imposing architecture in this space. A lot of kind of brown and gold tints, right? With a lot of heavy shadows. And then this is from the Blade Runner 2049, the more recent Denis Villeneuve upgrade, or sequel to that film. A very different take, right? It's much more kind of minimal, but the very stark square architectural elements, a lot of the shadows that are here, and the color tones, right? Kind of harken back to the 1982 film, so that even though the films were made many years apart, and they actually take place, right, many years apart, there's still something that really feels consistent about the world between these two films. So if, these films aren't ones that you've seen, I highly recommend doing a long movie night, and certainly watching them both. We're kind of staying with the science fiction genre. And here we're moving a little bit, we're kind of talking about decor, I think mostly with those last two slides and with these. Anybody recognize these slides? 2001, yeah, A Space Odyssey. So here we are, it's a kind of a vision of the future, a vision of space travel. Maybe it's a philosophical comment on human evolution as well. But you know, what we see here is a very kind of ideal and pristine idea of space travel. Right here in the kind of the first image, we see a spaceport. You know, it's the Hilton there. There's the coffee dispensary, very comfortable, you know, if not very dated looking chairs. And then the astronaut down below is, you know, wearing a robe. Everything is very clean, you know, and so it's a very kind of clean and pristine version of space travel. This from Ridley Scott's Alien from 1979, a film that kind of spawned a lot of sequels and a lot of really great films. Like, I think I love all of these films, but the original for me is really great. And here what we're looking at is a very different view of space travel. So if in 2001, A Space Odyssey, mankind is going to space for enlightenment, for kind of, you know, to satisfy our curiosity about what else is out there, Alien gives us a much more kind of lived in, industrial, maybe blue collar version of space, in which we have characters who are going out, you know, to basically collect natural resources from space. And of course, both of these films are great because they spawn two very different, but very ultimately, you know, incredibly terrifying and really iconic monsters in the Alien, you know, the xenomorph, and also in Hal. One is a kind of an enemy of our own making. The other is an enemy that we kind of go out and find. But I think that they are both, in a way, kind of connected to, or give us sort of warnings about human ambition, right? One is we try to make our machines too much like us, and the other one is kind of going out in pursuit, you know, to the stars with, you know, greed as our intention. Switching it up a little bit here, going back to the lens choice, what do you guys think? Wide angle or a telephoto lens here? This is from a film called Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Any thoughts? I see wide again. Yeah. Very much so, right? I mean, he is. I can almost read. If I come close, you can see. Yeah, we get that kind of distortion of the face. It looks like he's almost a balloon that's being blown up, right? And that's one of the effects of wide angle lenses. In addition to sort of making spatial relationships appear more exaggerated. It could be like an 18 millimeter. Sure. I mean, if we're shooting on 35, if he's pretty close to it, you know, certainly an 18, not quite a fisheye lens. We're not quite that extreme with it, but probably something in that ballpark. And so the effect of this, you know, one, it kind of gives the characters a certain zany, cartoonish kind of a quality, and it really puts us very kind of close to the action in a way that's sort of uncomfortable. So here are characters with a certain kind of mania, you know, that's being communicated by the lens choice. Here, just to go something different, another film that uses a lot of close-ups in its storytelling. This is The Passion of Joan of Arc, a silent film from 1928. Certainly a classic film, and we get a lot of portraits of this main character. Her name was Renee Falconetti, playing Joan of Arc in very close-up, a lot of low-angle kind of close-ups, which, you know, I think for me, being on so many Zoom calls with people's laptops on the ground, we see a lot of the undersides of people's chins, and it doesn't always look great. But in The Passion of Joan of Arc, we see a lot of low-angle shots, and they're all stunningly beautiful. It's a really beautiful film if you kind of can get yourself in the right headspace to watch it. Yeah, Kayla, I think absolutely. Certainly the close-ups here are beautiful. Well, it's a good question, Ozzy. Ozzy wants to know, how do we know if it's a scene shot on a prime lens, regular lens? So a prime lens is a little bit different than what we're talking about. So kind of, there's a lot of different ways to classify lenses, and mostly the way that I am talking about it is kind of a summation of what we'd call focal length. So an 18 millimeter versus a 25 versus a 50 versus a 75 millimeter lens. Those are different focal lengths. Whereas a prime lens, which I was going to kind of bring this out later, but this is an example of a prime lens. There it is. It's a 50 millimeter macro lens that I borrowed from our school for this kind of demo today. And what it means is that the focal length is fixed. So this is only ever going to be a 50 millimeter lens. If you have a DSLR or another camera that you bought, it probably came with a zoom lens, a zoom that, lens you can turn the barrel, zoom in and out, and get different focal lengths from it. So, it's hard to know if it's a prime lens or a zoom lens, but in terms of whether it's a wide angle lens or a telephoto lens, that's kind of what I want to give you some clues on here as we go forward. And one of the main ones is going to be, okay, do objects look distorted, right? Because wide angle lenses tend to kind of curve the light as it's coming in, and so they kind of bend space and time in that way. Whereas a telephoto lens, as you can see here, will kind of compress the foreground and the background, and she looks very, very slim. She's an actress and is very slim, but there is no kind of distortion here. So there are quite a few clues on whether you're looking at a prime lens or a telephoto lens or a wide angle lens. Of course, we can't do, like I called it, we can't do a talk on mise en scène without at least having a little bit of Wes Anderson in here. Although if you're a Wes Anderson fan, I also would recommend that and I'll put his name in here, one of my favorite filmmakers, his name is Peter Greenaway, and he did a film called A Z and Two Knots, which is just ZOO, The Draftsman's Contract. Peter Greenaway, he's a fantastic filmmaker and also comes from the background of a painter. And so you can see, a lot of his influence on Wes Anderson. So like, if you're a Wes Anderson fan, highly recommend you check out the films of Peter Greenaway as well. So Wes Anderson, right, likes to keep things kind of center framed, almost, symmetrical kind of framings. And so what we see here to give us a sense of the mood is the color, right? Is the color and the lighting is really what, yes, Mike, I'll just say yes, just watch it. So the lighting here is really what is giving us a sense of the mood in this shot. Next frame here is from a film called 12 Monkeys by Terry Gilliam directed. Terry Gilliam, who in this film also uses a lot of wide angle lenses. And here we have this, very canted angle here. So the woman here is very much tilted. And that is kind of what is giving us a sense of the world being, kind of off kilter, these, what we might call Dutch angles. Okay. Next two here are, well, one is still more about mise en scène, and then the next one is about the makeup in this particular film. I like this film. I think a lot of the films that we've shown so far have been very kind of macho, manly films and like Westerns and science fiction films. This is from a really beautiful little short film that actually Chloe Savini directed a couple of years ago called Kitty, and it's based on a short story. And I love this shot because all of the red lines, the red and the white stripes, everything that's happening in the frame here is really calling attention to the fact that she's just lost a tooth, right? So that kind of gap in the tooth, and so the teeth and the gums, right? The kind of red and the white being reflected in these stripes in the background here, and in the cotton candy, they all call attention to the fact that this little girl is going through a change, right? Starting to lose your teeth is certainly a marker of growing up. But for actually in this story, this little girl whose name is Kitty actually turns into a cat. She full on transforms into a cat in this film. Okay, so those kinds of are you know, just sort of a trip through some of the films that you know, that I like, I enjoy teaching. Hopefully give you some things to, you know, to think about while you're watching films, you know, be paying attention to the mise en scène, because none of this stuff just happens accidentally. Right, it is for the most part a very dedicated effort by all of the craftspeople who work on a film, and mise en scène is not really a film. It's not really a term that you would use on set. So your first day out on set at CCH, you know, you don't really want to say things like, "Hey, how about that mise en scène we're making today?" Right? It's more of a term that critics use after the fact to kind of talk about what has happened on set. So it's not really one of those terms that you use every day on set. You know, more than likely the answer to that will somebody say, you know, telling you to shut up and just go grab them a sandbag and or a cup of coffee. But it is certainly something to think about. Now, in terms of the kind of the next part of that, right? Also, all of those examples that we just looked at required a lot of people's time, a lot of people's money, and, you know, a lot of just people in general. And that's something that you may not have a whole lot of right now. So one maybe concept or thing that I would sort of challenge you or encourage you to take a look at right now is still life. Still life painting, still life photography. It is a way to, you know, kind of think about image making and make some pictures without needing a whole lot of stuff. And so if I might recommend a website here, let me do a screen share again. Okay. How many of you are familiar with the Google Arts and Culture? Let's see. There it is. This Google Arts and Culture website. Anybody been here? Possibly not. So let me type it. I'll put it in the. Yeah. So this is a really fantastic resource. I think if you just want to look at art in general, it basically is a sort of a repository. Well, I'll maybe describe it like this. It is to art museums what Google Street View is to the world. So it's kind of a collection of a lot of images and a lot of resources from different museums. And one of the things that you can do is create. I'll go ahead and put that in here as well. So there's a link in the chat there to this particular gallery that I've created. You know, because I think that still life is a great thing to just you know, to study, to look at. You know, there's a lot that you can learn from. Kind of keeping up with it, and there is a surprising amount of history, both to everyday objects, to things that you have in your home, and also to the kind of like the representation of a lot of those everyday objects. And if you know, think that the still life genre maybe is a dated, it's just a historical genre and kind of doesn't mean much to us these days. You know, you'll find examples from 2010, from the last couple of years, that, you know, we have sort of a surreal digital still life this year. There are, you know, from 1615, this is certainly much more of a traditional kind of a still life, and it's just, like, it's just breakfast. You know, I mean, there's really not a whole lot else to this except that it is, you know, it's breakfast. However, sometimes if we look more closely at the objects, at the food that's in there, there is a maybe an indication of class, of wealth that comes along with these. And certainly at the time, to have a painting like this in your house, it, you know, certainly wasn't as easy as just ordering a print off of Amazon and throwing it in a cheap frame, and you're good to go. So just having an image like this was a sign of wealth and status, and certainly, you know, the objects in here kind of are as well. And some of these, you know, you'll see are really more kind of compositions of studies of light. So if you're a photographer, you know, or a cinematographer, and you're trying to kind of find things to do right now just to keep your sort of eye sharp, you know, pay attention to light. A lot of us are kind of stuck in our houses, and so we get to see kind of parts of our house at different times of day. That's something to pay attention to. You know, what is your room, or what does your kitchen look like in the morning when the light is maybe coming in from it? You know, what does it look like in the middle of the afternoon? And what does it look like at night? So again, let's see, we're kind of running a little short on time here. There's one other one that I kind of wanted to show. Here we go. So here's a still life with grape juice and sandwiches. So if traditionally, right, still life paintings, the food that was in it and kind of who they were for was certainly much more for the, you know, like a kind of a wealthy aristocratic audience. Here, this artist is painting grape juice and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches because they are what they serve at a homeless shelter that he volunteers at. So at first glance, just looking at this and you think, oh, that's just like a picture of some, you know, grape juice and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. But the more you kind of get into it and understand what these things are, I think what you find out is that there's a story to be told here. And I think that in terms of a jumping off point with still life, you know, think about objects that are kind of important to you that sort of mean something to you. And so now I think what I want to do is share with you guys a couple of clips here that I made over the weekend, sort of in my downtime from Saturday until today, just kind of working on them a little bit here and there. And there are a couple of still life films. So let's see here. Let's go to. Oh, actually, let me make sure guys, optimize the screen share for video. There will be no additional sound with these, but certainly you could imagine kind of a sound design. Okay. And then here too, so what I was also doing here was, you know, I had a set of different prime lenses, and so was kind of using a few different lenses. And so we'll pause and we'll go back and look at a few kind of illustrative examples of what different focal lengths can do for you. So as a filmmaker here, what I'm thinking about doing is taking, you know, a still life, which is typically just one static frame that the audience kind of looks at over a long period of time, and one, kind of breaking it up a little bit more so that we can see each of the items individually. Also to take advantage of this little guy who showed up kind of in our bag from the farmer's market. I don't know if any of you guys ever go to farmer's markets, but often, you know, sometimes you end up bringing home a little bit more than you bargained for. And it always kind of freaks my wife out a little bit to find little bugs and things in our farmer's market bags. But I think they're quite charming. Also, as a disclaimer here, no bug was harmed in the making of this film. This little guy is still alive and kicking somewhere in that flower, which is it's an artichoke. I've eaten artichokes and I never knew that they could flower, but they had some flowering artichokes at the farmer's market. So I thought it was really interesting. So I got it and figured I'd put it in a film. So one thing to look at here at the end of this film, do you guys see on this board here, kind of how skewed it looks, right? That's one kind of telltale sign that this was shot using a wide angle lens, right? The perspective is kind of exaggerated more than normal, whereas the first shot here, roughly the same composition, but what you see is that the perspective on this board in the front here is a little bit more kind of normal looking. It's closer to what you would see with your own eyes. So that's one film, and then one more here, and then we'll kind of wrap it up.
And if anybody has any final questions, throw it into the chat. We'll answer those before you leave.
Okay, so this last one here is, again, sort of a, oh, actually, do you guys,
Yeah, I think it needs to be slid over.
oh, okay, let's see here. What do we, let's
Perfect.
stop sharing. Oh, you guys, okay. Hang on a sec, let me get back to it then. Afternoon with, okay. A lot of the same stuff that's in there, but just some things that I have around kind of in my studio, some of the, watercolor brushes, some fake fruit that's in there, a few different things. Here, another example, there's those two items on a telephoto lens and then on a wide lens. You can see there how the spatial relationships are kind of changed very drastically from one of those shots to the next. And then kind of with the iPhone too. So I was shooting this on a Red, but you guys can get really, really good quality stuff just with the iPhone or sort of whatever you have.
Hey, Dave, we have a question, if you don't mind me asking, coming in from Drew.
Sure.
He said he's always confused with the shutter speed rule. The shutter speed should be
Gotcha.
double of the frame rate or set according to lighting condition.
Gotcha. So shutter speed is, one of the elements of time in cinematography. So Drew, your basically the standard shutter speed for 24 frames per second photography is 1/48. And that comes from the days of a mechanical shutter that was used to shoot motion pictures. That basically, if we're shooting at 24 frames per second, the actual film is being exposed for half of that time. So you always can kind of figure out what the shutter speed should be. And so there we just see here, to wrap up here, there's kind of a daytime sort of look. There it is a little bit later in the afternoon. And then basically the same still life, but just shot with these, telephoto lenses. So we're just kind of closer and kind of cozier in on the objects, and we have just kind of a very different look. So this film was just me kind of going back to the same setup 3 times throughout the day to get a couple of different looks.
Great. All right, so I know we're wrapping up. Dave, I just want to thank you so much. Everybody, I just want you to know, Dave's the chair of the full cinema program. He oversees the LA campus, works with the Chicago campus. He's a busy guy, but he said, I want to be here. I want to work with these students. I know we can't wait to see all of you on campus, but Dave, thank you again. This was amazing. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course, guys. It was a
And
pleasure.
guys, this is just the beginning. We're hoping to do more events. I would love to do another one of these in June. If there's any topics you want, let us know. I know there's been a request on acting, different ways you could fine-tune that while stuck at home. So we will get back to you and send that out.
All right. Brad, do you mind if I get the last word in here?
Of course. You go right ahead, Dave.
Okay. I would not be a film teacher if I didn't assign you guys a little bit of homework based on this stuff. Okay, so I just want to give you kind of 3 really specific ways that you can like think about this still life stuff and kind of use it to sort of sharpen your eye, sharpen your mind, and tell some stories. So the first thing to do is to pick a set of objects that is meaningful to you, right? So assignment 1, right, might be set those things up in a particular place in your house. Go back to it a couple times in the day see how it changes, see how the lighting changes over the course of a day. The second thing would be take that same set of objects, try them in your bedroom, put them in your kitchen, put them in your living room, see if the background context kind of changes the story that those individual objects can tell. And then the third thing is, one setup at one time of day, but really experiment with different camera angles. And that's one great thing that you can do, really easily with the iPhone. You can move it around and get a lot of shots. Kind of easier than I can move this big hunking thing around and get, different angles and things. So yeah, great when you're on set and have a full crew. Not as convenient for working alone in the house. So anyway, that's your homework.
And don't tell your parents what you're doing. Just start grabbing stuff and move it around the house. It'll be fun. They'll think you've gone crazy. I love it. All right, guys. Thank you so much, Dave. That was amazing. Again, keep creating. Don't get down. Keep creating your work. Bye, everybody.
Bye, guys.